სამოქალაქო საბჭო თავდაცვის და უსაფრთხოების საკითხებში დღეს მეორე ინტერვიუს მასპინძლობს. ჩვენი სტუმარია ძალიან საინტერესო ქალი, სამხედრო მაგდალენა დვორაკოვა, რომელიც წარმოადგენს ჩეხეთის საჰაერო ძალებს და ამავე დროს ნატოს გენერალური მდივნის გენდერული მრჩევლის საერთაშორისო სამხედრო ოპერაციების ოფისის ხელმძღვანელია. მას ძალიან საინტერესო გამოცდილება აქვს 20 წელი ჩეხეთის საჰაერო ძალებში მსახურობდა. მაგდალენა სთან ინტერვიუ საინტერესოა რამდენიმე თვალსაზრისით. ერთი ის, რომ გვაქვს საშუალება უფრო სიღრმისეულად გავიგოთ ნატოს მიდგომები გენდერული თვალსაზრისით, რას ნიშნავს ქალები, მშვიდობა და უსაფრთხოება, როგორ არის ის ინტეგრირებული ნატოს მუშაობაში და ასევე საინტერესოა ისეთი საკითხები, როგორც არის თანამედროვე გამოწვევები გენდერული თანასწორობის, გენდერული მიდგომების, ქალები, უსაფრთხოება, მშვიდობა, განვითარებასთან ერთად რა ახალი გამოწვევები, რა ახალი წინააღმდეგობები, რა ახალი პერსპექტივები ჩნდება დღის წესრიგში, უსაფრთხოების და თავდაცვის პოლიტიკის დღის წესრიგში და ალბათ ბოლოს ვკითხავთ იმას თუ რას ეტყვის ის ახალგაზრდა დემოკრატიზაციის პროცესში მყოფ სახელმწიფოს, რომელსაც სურს, რომ გენდერული თანასწორობა იყოს მიღწეული ჩვენს ქვეყანაში და მათ შორის თავდაცვის და უსაფრთხოების სექტორში. Let me introduce our very honorable, let me say, guest, Lieutenant Colonel Magdalena Dvorakova from Czech Air Forces. She has been the head of the International Military Staff Office of the Gender Advisor since October 2015. But before that, for 20 years, Magdalena is part of Czech Air Force, and she is professional military. And at the same time, with very profound experience as a professional military person, woman, and at the same time working at NATO, which is political, defense, military organization, mainstreaming gender equality and women, peace and security agenda. Thank you very much, Magdalena, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and let me ask you maybe first question. Just let us start speaking about NATO's approach to gender equality. Gender perspective, on the other hand, which is, as we know, very well integrated into NATO operations, policies, and on the other hand, women, peace and security agenda, and how it is integrated, how does it work, and what are those actions taken by NATO to mainstream women in peace and security agenda?
Well, if I may, I will start with a quote of Mr. Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, who said that gender equality is not optional, it is fundamental. It allows us to respond smarter and better to the current security challenges. I think that NATO is stronger because of its international diversity and also gender diversity. So, as you mentioned, NATO has a system how to integrate a gender perspective and implement women, peace and security agenda through its own policy and also action plan.
Yeah. So there are 4 pillars of women, peace and security.
Yes, based on the resolution.
Resolution 1325. So how specifically each pillar is addressed by NATO policies and different frameworks?
Well, the 4 pillars are the prevention, participation, protection, and relief. And within the 3 core tasks of NATO, this is integrated by the policy and action plan on every level. The gender mainstreaming as a strategy to integrate gender equality within the system basically is mainstream through all the work that we do.
Yeah. And how are women represented in NATO today and in NATO member countries? So these statistics would be also very interesting from gender analysis point of view.
Well,
and who are these like first runners and countries which are a little bit dragging behind?
Well, for the reference to 2017, the average female representation in armed forces of NATO member nations is 11.1%, which is the average on a scale from 19.8% for one of the member nations and also 0.8% of another member nation. So the variety of the representation across the NATO member nation is quite diverse. And I think it is also part of the strong diversity element that I mentioned, that there are the nations who are the drivers of the agenda, and also those nations who are trying to challenge themselves to engage more effectively and proactively on the agenda within the NATO standard.
Yeah. Very interesting. And how now women are represented, these well-known military women in NATO, and what are their tasks? And can you just list maybe a few of them, and just for our audience who is interested, and how it's in practice, how it works in practice? Yes.
As I mentioned, there is over 11% of women in armed forces of NATO member nations. And out of them, 5.6 are getting deployed within the NATO military operations. So women are represented, not only being present within the armed forces, but they are also serving abroad. They are also represented within the NATO command structure. And yes, we do have some first ever to still challenge, but there's less and less of those moments where women are for the first time represented in some position. In 2018, we have now the first Deputy Secretary General, female, Ms. Rose Gottemoeller. I think she is amazing professional and also a mentor to many women who wants to follow her path, maybe not only to go to this one post, but within their own specific career. And on the military side, we have also some great female first ever that just been achieved. And for example, Lieutenant General Chris Whitecross, a Canadian general who is now a commandant of the NATO Defense College. And we used to have also women in NATO HQs. In HQ Sarajevo, General Jill Wiltz from US Armed Forces, and also the first four-star female admiral, Admiral Howard, who was a commander of the Joint Force Command Naples. And all of these women have well represented the minority of gender within the NATO leadership, and I think this is just opening door for the other women to eventually get to the same or different posts.
Yeah, it's so interesting because in our countries, just recently there was the new law was initiated on gender quotas for the politicians to be elected in parliament, and women parliamentarians also, they do not support it. Didn't support this bill, and the main idea in the society, in the parliament, was that so we should merit people according to their qualification rather than according to their gender. But I think that we were missing in this discussion, not that these women are not enough qualified, but we still, there are no enough opportunities for women still in this society to help women to be represented on this high positions in the parliament, government, or military. So I think this is the recent discussions in our society. So just how to manage? Do we need this some measures, even temporary measures, to help women to succeed in these spheres which are traditionally meant to be male dominated? So I mean, just if you have any idea about these measures, and in military especially, this question just came in my mind because yes, in NATO there are women, and they are because they are professionals and they are great women, so can be very good role models and examples for ours. So what do you think about this approach? Some kind of contemporary measures which legislation enshrines to help women to succeed?
Well, certainly I think that there is at NATO momentum where we do have, after many years and efforts, to increase the representation of women in the leadership or decision-making level, because there is currently 9 female permanent representatives. We also have, during the ministerials, 8 women defense ministers represented. And I think this is showing just the shift, which might be a result of the effort, or also change within the society. I think that this is reflecting in a NATO structure. And regarding the measures, there might be some short-term measures that can be helpful. I will not be suggesting yes and no, for each nation has, with their culture background, historical background, different point of view. And I think this is the beauty of the diversity of NATO and nations, that they need to find their own way how to manage that. But the essential to support this change of the mindset, or a change within the society acceptance, are definitely the representatives of the leadership who are engaged, and then the policies that are put in place to support such change.
Okay. And one more question about some current contemporary challenges in terms of women as victims and women as active actors and participants of defense and security environments. So what do you think about that? So women are no more, there is still gender-based violence, and very hot and very important issue, but on the other hand, the women are getting to be stronger, to be actively involved, to be agents, let us state in this way. So what kind of new challenges or new developments or new how to address this new environment we are entering in?
Well, as I quoted in the beginning, the NATO Secretary General, who was reflecting the gender perspective or the gender equality, that as a necessity to better respond to the new security challenges. Yes. I think that this is essential to consider, and not to just expect that such things will naturally be solved. I think we need to reflect that the security challenges are different than they were before. We need to look forward how they may evolve, and also respond to that within our armed forces. So I wouldn't say only just challenge, but also development, as we are now collecting the data from a NATO member and a partner nations on their statistical representation of women in the armed forces, besides other information. Since 1999, the average of the women representation within the armed forces of NATO member nations increased almost by 5%. When you consider that during those almost 20 years, some other nations entered the NATO and started to, on a much closer starting point, to tackle this issue of women, peace and security and gender perspective within their armed forces, according to the NATO policies and action plans, then I believe that there is a great shift and just needs to follow up on that development even further, because expecting that having women in the military, that is enough to consider them being proactive. It also needs to be reflected in within the training on education system of each of the nation.
Absolutely. And last points, your advices to Georgia on its pathway to democratization and democratic reforms in military and defense and security sector. How to tackle those challenges of gender equality and the balancing between some cultural aspects of gender relations and on the other hand new developments. We have to be parts of that. So I mean, what could you recommend to us?
Well, hard to recommend.
It's very experienced with similar from Czech Republic, which has also this more or less similar experience, legacy, which also plays its role, I think. So
yes, I think to tackle the topic from the national point of view, it's to look at the NATO policy and action plan, and then when making the national action plan, reflect the specifics of your culture and history and integrate that in within your national action plan. I have read your second national action plan, and I do like very much how it is focusing on 5 very important tasks with set baseline and outcome and lead entity and supporting entity. This is very much obligatory, and I think that for doing the right thing right, it is very important to have the accountability of the results. So there I see your way forward. I don't know how will your third national action plan look like, but I think you are on a right direction, and find your own speed and find your own ways how to implement the women, peace and security agenda within your armed forces so it serves you well.
Thank you very much, Magdalena, for your very thoughtful ideas, and it was great pleasure.
Thank you.
To have you.
Likewise.
Here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
ჩვენ ძალიან საინტერესო ინტერვიუ მოვისმინეთ მაგდალენა დვორაკოვასთან, რომელმაც მცირე დროში ძალიან საინტერესოდ აგვიხსნა და სიღრმისეულად რას ნიშნავს გენდერული პერსპექტივა თავდაცვის და უსაფრთხოების სფეროში და რატოა მნიშვნელოვანი გენდერული თანასწორობის მიღწევა, რომელიც საშუალებას გვაძლევს, რომ საზოგადოების ყველა რესურსი მაქსიმალურად იქნას გამოყენებული იმისთვის, რომ უფრო უსაფრთხო, მშვიდობიან და თანასწორ სამყაროში ვიცხოვროთ. მე მგონი უნდა გავითვალისწინოთ ეს რეკომენდაციები, განსაკუთრებით საინტერესოა ის, რომ ჩვენ გვჭირდება მეტი დისკუსია საზოგადოებაში ამ თემაზე. და ალბათ დადგება დროც, როდესაც ჩვენ უფრო მეტად განვიხილავთ ამ საკითხს და შევეხებით ისეთ თემებს, როგორიც არის მაგალითად გაწვევა ქალების, უნდა კონდეთ თუ არა მათ უფლება, ვალდებულება უნდა იყოს ეს თუ უფლება და ასე შემდეგ. ეს ის საკითხებია, რომელზეც ჩვენ მნიშვნელოვანი დისკუსიები სავარაუდოდ გველოდება წინ. და ფაქტიურად ნატო და ჩვენი პარტნიორები ამისთვის გვამზადებენ მთელი ეს ინსტრუმენტები, რაც გაგვაჩნია ჩვენი სამოქმედო გეგმები, პოლიტიკა, ეს გვეხმარება იმაში, რომ რაღაცა შედეგისკენ ვიყოთ ორიენტირებული. დიდი მადლობა.